E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa tainua ki a rātou ko mene atu, he tika tō lesta me maumahara i a rātou. Ka mihi hoki ki ngā kaipupuri o te ahika, ki ngā mana whenua, te atiawa, Ngāti Toa. Ka mihi nui ki a koutou o te riuroa, o te reo areare, engari anō konei, mō te manaakitanga, koe nā koutou. Max, tēnā koe mō te karakia kia pai te haere o te rā nei. He uri tēnei no te mahurihure o ngā puhi nui tonu, no te atiawa o Taranaki hoki. Kei hea koe Judith, kare kore he whanaunga, kei hea koe? Kare kore he whanaunga tāua, me kōrero tāua. Nō reira e hoa mā tēnā rā koutou katoa. Morning everybody, it's a great honour and a great pleasure to have been invited by Te Riuroa to speak to you today, and I'm quite nervous, so I will relax. Firstly, I want to acknowledge and thank, of course, Te Riuroa and Te Reo Are for their amazing hospitality, especially to our overseas guests. And I also want to acknowledge the tangata whenua of this place. I also really want to acknowledge NZEI's level of commitment to the treaty relationship, their level of commitment also to our reo rangatira, to te reo Māori, I think is very reflected in the increasing bilingual nature of the webpage. So kia ora mō tēnā. I think the commitment can be seen in so many things, in our whakatau yesterday, and also in our waiata, and I hope I get a long one. A little in-joke. And I think what's been happening, I really believe it's a reflection of those things that we really value today and that we want to hold on to and carry on into the future. Okay, you may have noticed that there's a small change in the title of the presentation. Yay. My father told me to make it. As a daughter and as a second language speaker, I made it, so it's changed from ki muri to ki whakamuri. And titiro ki mua, haere whakamuri is a deliberate play on words. As some of you will know that in te reo Māori, mua and muri can be understood in a whole raft of different ways. Mua can be understood as in front of, but it can also be understood as the past. Ngā rā o mua literally means the days in front, and that's referring to the past. Muri is used to locate the future behind us. So kei muri, we walk, keeping the past always in our sights, walking into a future that we can't really know for sure what's going to happen. So thinking about and preparing for this presentation provided me an opportunity really to pause and reflect not only on the future and current situation, but also very much on the past, in recognition that for me, moving forward involves keeping what has gone on before very much in front of me, very much in sight, as expected in a Māori worldview. It also links with my belief, my view, that a critical aspect of moving forward in Māori medium education is about moving back. Moving back to the aspirations and desires that were fundamental to the creation of Māori medium pathways last century. Those pathways such as kohanga reo, kura kaupapa Māori, rumaki units, bilingual units, kura a iwi, whare wānanga. Now, this presentation draws from a number of recent studies and projects involving kura and Māori medium contexts and classes. Some of the studies I've been personally involved in, either as a researcher, as an advisor, as a critical friend, as a reviewer. And these projects include the best evidence synthesis on leadership, and my main brief on that project was to focus on Māori educational leadership, particularly Māori medium educational leadership. I was involved in an evaluation of schooling improvement in Māori medium settings and led the Māori medium thread of that project. I was also a researcher alongside my colleague Ngārewa Hawera that followed the development and refinement of ngā whanaketanga, the national standards parallel in Māori medium settings. And I think all of you are aware that the path for ngā whanaketanga was somewhat different from the path for national standards, and I think it very much reflects what Māori medium has been about. That that developments in Māori medium have to involve the whole whānau, have to involve tamariki through to kaiako and tumuaki, through to teachers and principals. I guess one thing that I'd like to say about whanaketanga too is that while they parallel national standards, they're not exactly the same as national standards. They're not a translation. And one small but significant way they differ is that in the te reo whanaketanga, in the parallel to the reading and writing whanaketanga, reading and writing national standards, oracy has been included. And I just want to say that was very hard fought for by the developers of ngā whanaketanga. What I'm involved with now, I'm very excited about, is looking at transitions that occur in Māori medium settings, particularly transitions from kohanga into kura, into Māori medium school classrooms. Now, standing here before you actually brings me forward into the past in another sense as well. And it was back in 1996 that I was involved in my first keynote panel presentation to an NZEI conference. And that was, I don't know if any of you have been around as long as me, that was the NZEI Pacifica conference that was held at Te Puia Marae in Māngere. Was anyone there? No. And back then I was part of a keynote presentation along with Professor Kuni Jenkins, with Glynis Paraha and Dr. Lonisi Tanielu. And what we were talking about was, or what we focused on was education in the 21st century for children of the Pacific. Now, yesterday Lester mentioned photos of family, and as Martin didn't take that opportunity up, I'm going to. So at the time of the NZEI Pacifica conference, our three tamariki were all in a kura kaupapa Māori. These are my oku māpihi mauria, my most treasured possessions, and I guess if I think about what my husband and I wanted for our children back then in the 80s and 90s, when my oldest son started kohanga reo, I was a primary school teacher in an English medium classroom in the Bay of Islands. And by the time my youngest, the little one in the front, started kohanga reo, I was a researcher in kohanga reo settings. And I think that they were the reason that I got into research. They were the drive and the passion that drove me, I think, to want to find out what was happening for our tamariki and actually work in ways to contribute and strengthen what was happening for them. And our dreams and aspirations as parents at that time, as whānau, as school communities, of kohanga and kura movements, I think were very much expressed in Te Aho Matua, the philosophical statement for kura kaupapa Māori that was written about the time that my oldest son started kura kaupapa. So what did we want? This is the kura that they all, the kura whānau that they all belonged to in those years. Now, what we wanted for our children was for them to have pretty much what, so it parallels really well what Lester started our morning off with, actually. We wanted a holistic education that developed all dimensions of our children. Their taha wairua, their taha hinangaro, taha tinana, taha whānau, the physical, the spiritual, the cognitive, their family relationships. We wanted our children to continue to grow as bilingual and bicultural beings. We wanted an education that enabled them to develop secure in their identity, to know who they were from, to know where they were from, to know who they belonged to. We wanted them to know who they are as descendants of Māori, and you just need to have looked at my children to know that they are descendants of non-Māori as well. And it's just as important for them to know their whakapapa and who they are on that side. And I think as Manu, if you've had a chance to look at the little clips on the website, as Mana Pohatu says on that website, kia tū maia, kia tū rangatira rātou, hei raukura mō tōna iwi. We wanted an education for our children, but we wanted an education for our children that enabled them to be treasures for our iwi, for their iwi, and to be, if you like, workers, skilled, knowledgeable people that could contribute to the ongoing growth and development of their iwi. And we also wanted our children to develop high levels of knowledge in te ao whānui, the wider world. And for me, the wider world includes te ao Māori. It's not something apart from te ao Māori. And I can remember talking with a parent in my PhD study when I asked her, why have you put your tamaiti into, why have you put your child into kura? What are your thoughts and aspirations around his journey, if you like, in the wider world, in non-Māori contexts? And her reply was that, as far as she was concerned, every context that her child was in was a Māori context because her child was in it. Now that I'm a krani, now that I'm a grandmother, and of these 5 beautiful tamariki, can you see them? No? There they are. I think what I want for them as a grandmother hasn't changed that much for what I wanted for my own children, except now it's probably taken on even a greater significance. And I think I sort of reflect on why is it that it's all so much more important now. It was important when my children were young, were this age, but it's even so much more important and critical to me as a grandmother. And I wonder if it's got something to do with when my children were young, we were running around just trying to put kai on the table. And now we can sort of step back a bit, and that's the parents' job, so we can worry about other more significant things. But if I was a concerned parent, I'm actually, those concerns have faded into insignificance in relation to my concerns that I have for my mokopuna. Now, they are definitely the drivers of, I guess, my research these days. So in the words of yesterday's theme, to take stock, at the end of last century, we had before us Māori parents in Aotearoa helping to establish kohanga reo and kura kaupapa Māori along with other Māori medium programs and schools. These first kura were established to support Māori culture and language regeneration, and also to take control of the education of our children, and to help to intervene in educational, economic, cultural, political challenges that were facing us as Māori. And our goals, our linguistic goals, our educational goals, our political goals were influenced. They really influenced what we wanted for our tamariki at that time. Now, in the early days of kura, a lot of our energies were taken up with things like just trying to find a building to have our kura in, fixing up the garage or fixing up a condemned building as classrooms for our tamariki. Our concerns were with developing curriculum resources, with developing kaiako, and finding funding for kaiako before we came under the Education Act. Moving back into the present day, the second decade of the 21st century, we now have a national curriculum, and that national curriculum includes a New Zealand curriculum for English medium settings and te marautanga o Aotearoa for Māori medium settings, and I celebrate that. I think that is a wonderful achievement. We also have national standards across compulsory schooling. We have the national standards in English, and we have whanaketanga in Māori. I'll say no more, except that these are officially about raising student achievement and about improving our accountability to our children and to their whānau. I don't have a problem with that at that level. I think we are all concerned about achievement, and we are all concerned about being accountable to our tamariki and to our families. But how do these whanaketanga sit with aspirations that whānau hold in Māori medium today, in kura kaupapa Māori and other settings today? In 2009, Nuki Tākau and others, Dennis Grinnell, Kate McKeag, Nan Wehi-Paihana, carried out a study of 5 kura kaupapa Māori that were considered operating successfully, if you like. And they carried this out before ngā whanaketanga were introduced into Māori medium schooling, although they were in the process of development. Now, among other things, the study examined what these kura identified as successful, as what success means to them, what success means to the parents, to the kaiako, to the grandparents, to the teachers, to the staff, to the graduates and the students. And as you can see, just from these examples, what success means wasn't viewed or isn't viewed in terms of how well they may have done on literacy and numeracy assessments, where they might be placed, where they might be levelled on whanaketanga or even NCEA. It's much more holistic than that. They still express very much a desire for the development of the tamaiti as a whole. And I love the notion of creativity, integrity, humility, perseverance, compassion. They still very much focus on our tamariki and their development for themselves, but also within the context of being members of whānau, hapu and iwi, being members that need to be able to contribute to whānau, hapu and iwi. So I think, Bob, you used the term, if I can get, performativity. This is education that is not about performativity. This is education that is aspirational, unapologetically aspirational. It's education that's about cultural survival. It's education about rangatiratanga, about self-determination. And it's education about social justice and liberation. No, back one. In 2010, I worked on a project, like I said, following the development and refinement of ngā whanaketanga te reo. And it's a bit of an irony, Martin, if I can find you. It's a bit of an irony, Martin. This project, from a small sample, 4 kura, was funded and published by the organisation that critiqued the RAINS project for having a small sample, so I'll leave it at that. Nearly all the parents said they wanted to know how their tamariki were doing in terms of reading, writing, in terms of mathematics, and nearly all parents explicitly said they saw those things as highly important, as very important. But they also saw a whole lot of the other areas as equally, if not more important, than literacy and numeracy. And they were interested in a whole range of aspects of their children's learning and development that I think are not that different from the concerns of parents in English medium. They were concerned that their children were happy. They were concerned that their children were able to make friends. They were concerned that their children were able to develop socially, to interact and to be socially competent. But they also mentioned aspects that relate directly to Māori language, to te reo Māori, me mātauranga Māori, Māori language and Māori knowledge. They saw these as highly valued areas, which is not surprising because that's one of the key reasons that we send our children to kura and to Māori medium settings. Some of them were interested in how ngā whanaketanga would support their children developing and gaining skills relating to their iwi. So as one said, how will whanaketanga help ensure that he learns tikanga from where he's from and kawa from his iwi? They wanted to know how their child's fluency in te reo Māori was developing. They wanted to know about the benefits of keeping their children in Māori medium, about their confidence levels, about their ability to transition into new environments and new contexts. Now, parents identified two main areas of concern. One related to the potential uses and reporting of information generated by ngā whanaketanga about achievement and about progress in school. While these parents also reported, some of these parents also reported that they wanted to know how their children were doing in terms of the national patterns, in relation to national patterns of achievement. But they were, on the flip side of that, they were worried about how national patterns of achievement could be used in punitive ways that could be damaging to kura kaupapa Māori and Māori medium education as a movement. How it might actually work against the development and strength of Māori medium. They had real concerns across the four kura about how whanaketanga could impact negatively on the unique nature of their kura. And those of you who know something about kura know that the desire is that kura are whānau-driven, hapu-driven, iwi-driven, depending on where they are located. And because of that, they develop their own unique nature, not dissimilar from local school curriculums, but their own unique nature that reflect and express, if you like, their iwitanga, their tribalness. How would that be? How would that fare within a whanaketanga, a national standards environment? And of course, I just want to reiterate, there was a strong concern about how valued areas of learning would fare within a national standards environment, with a whanaketanga environment that focuses specifically on pāngarau, mathematics, tuhi, kōrero and pānui, speaking, reading and writing. So if the core aims and aspirations underpinning Māori medium are to be recognised in a standards environment, including rangatiratanga, including bilingualism, including biculturalism, including iwitanga, it's a real understatement to say that some thought needs to be given with how these are placed within a national standards environment, how these are placed as fundamental to what's understood as academic outcomes. They're not instead of academic outcomes, they're not added on to academic outcomes, they are part and parcel of academic outcomes. Okay, international evidence, as I think many of you know, indicates that the introduction of national standards is not good news for Indigenous peoples or Indigenous languages. USA, the No Child Left Behind was introduced in 2002, and that the law included a high-stakes accountability system that utilises testing. We haven't gone there, and I hope we never go there. Now, an arguably positive side of the initial development of No Child Left Behind was that in the beginning there was an inclusion, or there was a, what's the English word I'm looking for? A whakaaro. There was the thought, the whakaaro, to include in the design special regard for the language and cultural needs of Native American students. However, the introduction of No Child Left Behind was very quickly followed by increasingly policies that increasingly dismantled, increasingly undermined, increasingly eliminated bilingual education funding, to the extent that No Child Left Behind became very much known as No Child Left Bilingual. And No Child Left Behind, I suppose, the nature of it is that those tests that make up its accountability system are English-only assessment tests. And again, while ngā whakanaketanga national standards we know is full of issues, problems, has fundamental flaws, at least we can celebrate that it's flawed in both languages. Okay, there has been research following the introduction and implementation of No Child Left Behind in Indian country, sometimes known as No Child Left Indian, and it shows that the gap has actually increased between Native American, Native Alaskan children and non-Native children. So unsurprisingly, the research shows that with the introduction of No Child Left Behind, there's been an increasing restriction and increasing thinning down of the curriculum at the expense of other curriculum areas, including Indigenous language, including Indigenous culture programs. And according to Teresa McCarthy, there's a mountain of evidence that shows there has been very little gap reduction for children of Indigenous peoples. And this has been particularly when Indigenous education programs, be they Indigenous immersion programs or Indigenous education programs within English medium settings, this is particularly when those programs give way on the Indigenous language and cultural components of their program. So that is that the more a program has concentrated on English language literacy, English language mathematics, the lower the test scores in the English language tests. And that, in contrast with programs that have persevered with their native language and native cultural programs. Closer to home in Australia, while Indigenous languages have received significant recognition in policy over there, language policy over there over the years, other national policy developments, including the national literacy standards, have resulted in almost an exclusive emphasis on English. And Graham McKay at St John's University of Tanzania describes this issue as invisible language policy, the favouring of standard Australian English, undermining policy statements aimed at protecting and regenerating Indigenous languages. I'm just watching him. I don't want to take any of your time. Okay, so coming back to Aotearoa, national standards, it's not rocket science, present particular challenges for Māori education. One of the challenges, as I've been saying, relates to what is valued, what is considered valued student outcomes and achievement in a standards environment. Standards, the philosophy of standards, the notion of standards, contradict many kaupapa Māori philosophies, contradict many of the philosophies and the principles and the beliefs that underpin Māori medium education, about what learning is valued and important, about how children learn, how our tamariki learn, about how achievement should be expressed. It contradicts, I believe, our expectations that we hold that all tamariki learn, but that not all tamariki, as Lester was saying, not all tamariki will be at the exact same place at the exact same time. And that it's more than that, the expectation that all tamariki will have their particular skills, will have their particular gifts, if you like. And we need to be looking out for those as well and thinking about how we develop those. Contradicts achievement expectations needing to take into account the amounts of time a tamariki or a tamaiti has spent in immersion context. And I've heard some of you talk about similar kind of concerns about children who come in with other languages and the amount of time they've had to learn in English in relation to how we need to understand their achievement. Similarly, children in kura come in with a whole raft of Māori, te reo Māori experiences and te reo Māori levels. These need to be taken into account. The developers initially wrote this into the draft whanaketanga. It now is no longer there. The expectation is that kaiako will measure their tamariki irrespective of how long they've been learning in te reo Māori. Kura kaiako, Māori medium professional learning and development providers, whānau, have made strong attempts to try and address these contradictions. For example, rather than using descriptors that talk about at, above or below, the kind of language that's used is things like manawa taki, manawa ora, manawa toa, talks about the manawa, the heart of the child in terms of the progress the child's making, the tamaiti's making, and talks about the kind of support that needs to be wrapped around that child in order for them to develop and learn in the ways that they need to. Okay, my concern is unapologetically in the Māori medium context, with the Māori medium context, but I'm hoping those of you who are working in English medium contexts are able to take some of the things I'm saying and being able to think about what it means in your schools. I don't profess to have much of a working knowledge of English medium settings as a researcher. I had to Google national standards to find out that it uses at, above, below, and to get a better understanding of how it's expected to work. But those tamariki up, my mokopuna up there, one of them goes to an English medium school. And I'm also a grandmother, so I'm a grandmother and I'm also an aunt, a grand-aunt of tamariki that go to English medium schools. And for some of them, the Māori language and culture programs, the Māori, te reo Māori and tikanga programs that are in those English medium schools that they attend, they are sometimes the most significant opportunity, if not the only opportunity, for them to develop knowledge about their Māoritanga, about who they are as a Māori child. And if national standards work to undermine the Māori te reo Māori programs, the tikanga programs that you have worked also hard to develop in our English medium schools, if they work to undermine the progress that we've worked so hard to make in terms of ensuring that Māori has a legitimate, valuable place in our schools, not as an add-on but as an integral part of our English medium programs, then I think that must be added to the list of critical issues that Bob and Martin raised yesterday. However, it's not all doom and gloom. It hasn't been all doom and gloom. Kura were born out of activism. Every parent and grandparent who chose kura and kohanga for their tamariki last century were practising activism, and I think we can consider that they're doing that today. And we know that as Māori, we're very good at making the best of bad deals. We've been doing it for over a century. And as Lacey Wyman and her associates say, one-way contradictions such as this, one-way policies that are so fundamentally flawed, one way they can be dealt with is by approaching them in ways that maximise opportunities that they present to open up new ideological and implementational spaces. Martin talked about it in another way. It's sort of like making the best of a bad situation, trying to find the silver lining in the clouds. Sometimes, Māori, we're used to it. We get given a situation, how can we milk it? How can we get the best out of it? Given our realities. So at present there are kura and kaiako who won't touch whanaketanga with a barge pole. There are kura and kohanga that use whanaketanga to help them understand where their tamariki are in terms of their literacy and their numeracy, but don't report those. Don't report those to the ministry, or don't report them to the ministry in forms that the ministry wants. There are kura who use the whanaketanga to help guide the development of their understandings of where their tamariki are at, but don't use them to put their children, their tamariki, on different levels. So there's a whole lot of things that are happening with whanaketanga across the Māori medium spectrum, if you like. Now, kaiako that are using them have said that they can provide rich learning opportunities. They can open up, as Lacey Wyman and them say, they can open up implementational spaces, ideological spaces. For example, they've found that they have provided them with rich learning opportunities to develop their knowledge about the marautanga, to develop their knowledge and skills in developing learning and teaching programs from the marautanga. They've provided opportunities for them to increase their assessment knowledge, their assessment-related knowledge, in terms of te reo, in terms of reading, writing, oracy, pāngaro mathematics, but in terms of other things as well. They've provided opportunities to gain an understanding of how whanaketanga and marautanga are aligned and to exploit those alignments. How am I going? Okay. Now, according to have any of you had a look at the ERA report 2012 that looked at whanaketanga? No? Oh, yep. So I think one of the things that the whanaketanga, the ERA report did was, for me anyway, highlight the importance of kura, of Māori medium holding on to the visions, holding on to the aspirations in the face of this performativity education. So according to the report, the early indications are that parents and whānau aspirations for their tamariki and for the kura are significant in a whanaketanga environment, in a national standards environment, in the sense that the ERA report on readiness for implementing whanaketanga, for implementing marautanga, because one of the things that I think is important to know, that while New Zealand curriculum was implemented first, followed by the national standards, Māori medium had the pleasure of trying to implement the two of them together. But what ERA found was that readiness to implement both those things were strongly influenced by the level of parent and whānau involvement and the level of aspirations, I suppose the level of identification of clear aspirations and goals by whānau. Okay, so I guess for me what remains to be seen is how while according to ERO, those visions, those aspirations, those goals are critical for the implementation of whanaketanga, for the implementation of marautanga, it remains to be seen how those goals and aspirations for our tamariki will continue to fare in a national standards environment that emphasises very small section of learning and development that we want for our tamariki. And also what remains to be seen, I think, is how will the principles of active whānau involvement and leadership be played out in a national standards environment that emphasises reporting to parents as well as the ministry. And why I'm concerned about that is that the ongoing history in front of us and behind us of Māori medium schooling, of kura kaupapa Māori, is premised on active whānau involvement, active whānau control. That's the aspiration, that's the desire. And if we have a situation where it's restricted down to kura here, school here, whānau here, school reports to parents, about how their children are doing, tells parents what they need to do in order to ensure their children make the standard. What does that mean for a view or a vision of kura as one family, one whānau? Within that whānau are the tamariki, are the parents, are the teachers, are the caretakers, are the administration staff. What does it mean for that? Those principles of whānau involvement. And finally, because I said I'd do this in the abstract, and you know, when you write an abstract sort of 6 months before you write the paper, and then when you finally get a little pocket of time to start really thinking about what you're going to talk about on the day, and you look at your abstract and you think, what was I thinking? I can't do all that in 40 minutes. But anyway, and because I said that I would do this, here are some of the implications I think standards have for leadership in Māori medium and kura. And by leadership, I mean that in the widest, most inclusive way. Like I've just been saying, as kura whānau ideally are understood as including everybody that has something to do with that kura or that school, kura leadership is understood in the same way. Kura were developed by the leadership of parents, of grandparents, of community, of iwi, and kura leadership ideally should remain that way. So thinking broadly about kura leadership, Māori medium leadership, in a national standards environment, how do we ensure that that whānau inclusive leadership continues? That whānau decision-making, kura whānau as leaders in their children's schooling, continues to operate. How do we ensure leadership that ensures that te reo Māori, tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori remain as a central po, as a fundamental part of what is understood as student achievement, as educational achievement, within a context that privileges literacy and numeracy. What does leadership need to be doing to ensure that we have well-informed, knowledgeable whānau, well-informed, knowledgeable, critically thinking whānau, who are able to continue to exercise control over their children's education, who continue to be able to make good decisions, make good educationally, culturally, tino rangatiratanga, sound decisions for their children's education within these changing times full of germs and full of bugs. Ka nui tēnā rā tātou katoa.